for the internationally acclaimed exhibition Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, that will open in June at Union Station here in Kansas City, Missouri. Founded by Holocaust survivors 25 years ago, MCHE has worked tirelessly to bring knowledge and understanding of the Holocaust to the heart of America. With the expertise of Jessica Rockhold, our executive director, and Dr. Shelley Klein, our director of education and historian, we have collaborated with Union Station to organize a program of over 15 presentations by historians, scholars, and by family members of survivors to share their perspectives and their experiences. All of these events are free and they can be attended remotely. In today's uncertain times, when we see the rise of authoritarian regimes with all too frequent incidences of anti-Semitism and ethnic and religious oppression, the importance of this exhibition cannot be stressed enough. And it underscores the need for MCHE to continue its mission to teach the history of the Holocaust and to apply its lessons to counter indifference, intolerance, and genocide. And it's now my pleasure to introduce George Clostello, the president of Union Station, Kansas City. George.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate this opportunity to kick off our inaugural event. It's been 5 years that we've worked closely with the Midwest Center for Holocaust Education to bring this exhibition to Kansas City and to our community. As we look to the future, we see amazing opportunities and the detailed presentations that Midwest Center for Holocaust Education will be providing us. It will go deep and it will reach the community in a very profound way. On behalf of our board of directors and our staff, we are honored to be able to bring this exhibition to Kansas City. As Carl said, we'll be opening on June 14th. And last Monday, tickets went on sale to the general public. It's so encouraging to see the community's response. We've had over 20,000 pre-sale tickets. And since Monday, when we went on sale for individual tickets, over 6,000 tickets have been sold. So nearly 26,000 people have already signed up for over 38 different states. And the response has been quite amazing. I think this is a true affirmation that now is the right time to bring this history and message of diversity, tolerance, and inclusion to our community and beyond. Standing up to hatred starts with one individual, and knowing what to look for and realize the consequences of doing nothing whenever it is seen. I hope this presentation series and the upcoming exhibition strengthens us all and reinforces our resolve to never let the seeds of Holocaust take root again. Again, all of us in Union Station are humbled and honored to be able to work with the Midwest Center of Holocaust Education to bring this exhibition to Kansas City. This is one of our very first, but not one of our lasts. Jessica, back to you, and thank you for your staff and your guidance through this process.
Thank you so much, George. Tonight, it is really my pleasure to be able to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Fran Sternberg. First, by way of a formal introduction. Fran is affiliated with the University of Kansas Jewish Studies program, where she teaches a range of Jewish history courses, everything from modern Jewish history to medieval and early modern Jewry, the Holocaust, Hitler and Nazi Germany, and the history of Jewish women. Her research and areas of interest are 19th and 20th century East European Jewry, interwar Polish Jewry, the shtetl, anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust. As you can tell, there's very little that Fran is not interested in and not well versed in. More than her professional biography, it's my pleasure to introduce her tonight as my former colleague, We spent 11 years together at the Midwest Center for Holocaust Education, where she was our historian. And she is my mentor. Fran taught me what I know about the Holocaust. And I'm so pleased to be able to share tonight and learning with you from Fran. So with that, I turn it over to Dr. Fran Sternberg.
Okay, let me see if I can get this to share. Can I just speak now, or excuse me? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jessica, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak about something that I feel very strongly about, and a subject that has increasingly become very close to the kinds of things I'm interested in, which is to say, the way the Holocaust is visualized, the way it has been visualized by the survivors, by the perpetrators, by the bystanders, and so on. And the use of photographs, which has for me become an extremely important part, even of the way I teach. So I appreciate being able to do this tonight. I also am very grateful to MCHE for giving me this opportunity, and honored that I am the first speaker in this series. I didn't realize that. So thank you very much for that as well. And so without further ado, I'm going to open up my PowerPoint, and I will talk a little bit when I get to the first slide, which is the title slide, and then we'll just proceed through the PowerPoint. So let me try to share screen here. Is it sharing?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So here's the title slide. And there's a lot even in the title slide. The idea here, we have several things I want to go through with you today, sort of a multi-layered process. The idea of genocide, visualizing it, the idea of Auschwitz and something called the Auschwitz Album, which obviously has something to do with this genocide, and the actual destruction process and the way the album reflects two views, or at least to start with, two layers of that process, or two layers of visualization of that process. So let's go to the next slide. Just a minute. I'm sorry, we'll start with the setting. And the way I've divided this up, since it is about visualization, I've divided it up in along the lines of a scenario, or perhaps not a movie so much, but as a sort of a putting together of a visual project. So first, let's start with the context, or if you were talking about a group of photographs or a movie, the setting. And I've subtitled this The Last Days, because that actually was a movie about the Holocaust in Hungary. And so this is really, a lot of this will have to do with the Holocaust in Hungary, which comes at the end of the Holocaust. Next slide. So what we're looking at here, essentially, to start with, is a whole lot of special. And the word special, I noticed a few people in the audience are my former students, or have heard me talk. And when I talk about the Holocaust, and particularly the perpetrator perception of the Holocaust and the way the perpetrators articulate the Holocaust, I use the word special because they did. It's one of their bureaucratic terms. It's a neutral, very bland term. In German, the word is Sonder. And whenever you see that connected to, or put into the context of another word, the word Sonder always implies murder, and specifically genocide, the Holocaust, with respect to the Jews. Sonderbehandlung, special treatment, appears in their documentation. Sonderaktion, special actions. And so, in a way, the Holocaust, we think of it as unique. The Holocaust is a special genocide. What makes it special, what makes it Sonder, what makes it different, is not so much the murder or the fact of the numbers, but the fact that it was systematic, and that it was done, as Raul Hilberg says, on an assembly line basis. And it used all of the infrastructures of a modern state and society. And this is an important thing. And Auschwitz is a very special place, because for us, Auschwitz has become the symbol of the Holocaust. It's it's sort of the thing that stands for the whole. And so this is an important perception. And so we start with the idea of a special genocide. Now, the other thing about this special genocide is that there were specific facilities in which that genocide was pursued. There were 6 death camps in Poland, and if you look down the side of this slide, you will see that Auschwitz is the one that is left. When the others have fulfilled the task, the special task, as the Germans would say, that they had been set up for, killing largely Polish Jewry, but also other groups as well, they were then shut down. And in the end, the only camp really left standing to finish the genocide is Auschwitz II-Birkenau. So again, we have a special genocide with special facilities. And then we have a very special way in this special genocide of collecting the populations that were going to be taken to those death camps and killed there. And again, if you look at this, I know it's a kind of jumbled map, but it's actually, in effect, what they did was they threw out 4 dragnets over a period of time. And in the context of those dragnets, they rounded up Jews in a sort of given set of circumferences. And if you look again, we come to the idea of Auschwitz at the end, but more importantly as well, the last group of Jews to go are the Hungarian Jews. They're in group number 4, and they're the most sizable group in group number 4. There are some small ones, as you can see, those little green ones. But basically what I'm trying to get at here, and this is an important concept, is that the Hungarian Jews are the largest single remaining Jewish community in 1994. And we'll come to that in a moment as well. And so basically what you have going on is that this is a very special part of this special genocide. And this last dragnet is the most special dragnet of all. And again, I'm using it in the German context of Sonder, this kind of bureaucratic prefix to indicate a very particular action having to do with murder. And of course, in terms of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the death camp, the other thing that's really important about Auschwitz in this regard is the transport to Auschwitz, the trains that come in. 44 lines of track lead to Auschwitz from all across Europe, as far south as Rhodes and as far north as Bergen, Norway. And east to west as well. And the area we're going to be concerned with today is the area that you can see is shaded in red here, Munkac, Bergezas, and so on. And we'll have a better map later. But in any case, 44 lines of track lead to Auschwitz. They are all trains belonging to the Deutsche Reichsbahn, because the Deutsche Reichsbahn took over all the railroads, the national railroads of the other trains. And in the beginning, before the Hungarian Jews were going to be deported, before Germany had even occupied Hungary, when the trains got to Auschwitz, they stopped at to Auschwitz-Birkenau, they stopped at a freight station, an old freight station that was located a walk from the death camp, about half a mile from the actual death camp. And everybody had to go from the trains, the freight trains, all the way on foot, all the victims, to Auschwitz-Birkenau from that old freight dump. But in anticipation, well, before I even get to that, the other thing about Auschwitz that made it special, besides this vast network of trains and the notion of the fact that it's the last camp standing to basically kill whatever is left of Europe's Jews, is the fact that in 1943, they built 4 what one can only call state-of-the-art killing installations. And you can see them here on this map. They're at the west end of the camp. This is Auschwitz II-Birkenau. Again, Auschwitz is a very large camp. There are 3 parts to it, but the part we're concerned with today is this one. This is the death camp. And so we have 4 very large industrial strength, if you will, gas chamber crematorium combinations. And these would replace the much smaller facilities that had been used till then. And so again, this is another sense of Auschwitz specialness in this framework. And then we come, of course, to the special case, and that is Hungarian Jews. And again, from the inception of the plan to murder Hungary's Jews, it was always considered a special operation. And that's another word that the Germans use as part of their office language, Aktion, operation. And so there were, in 1944, there are 800,000 Jews living in Hungary. It's the last intact Jewish community in Europe. Everything else is gone. The only other things left is the rump of the Lodz ghetto and a couple of, and you know, parts of Croatia and so on. But largely it is the Hungarian Jews that become the target in 1944. Now, the other thing, and again, this is, it's very hard to do European history without, unfortunately, going into some complexity about the map. This isn't terribly complex, but it's something to keep in mind. The areas we are going to look at, the areas that are the subject of the pictures we're going to look at today, were not part of Hungary before 1938 in one case and 1940 in another. And specifically, we're going to concentrate on the Jews of Carpathian Ruthenia. That had been part of Czechoslovakia before 1938, but in November 38, it was ceded, because the Germans had taken over Czechoslovakia, it was ceded to Hungary. Now, the other area, northern Transylvania, is often mixed up into the pictures, and it too was given to Hungary somewhat later in November of 1940. It had belonged to Romania. So the Jews we're looking at are considered, they come from Hungary. The town names I'm using are Hungarian. But in point of fact, the way things are today, some of these are Romanian, some of these are Ukrainian, and only a few are Hungarian. But in any case, we are looking at the area here, then again, of Carpathian Ruthenia, and maybe limitedly northern Transylvania. Now, the back history is basically that in March of 1944, the Germans occupy Hungary. It's a long story as to why they do, or perhaps a short story, but not one I'm going to burden you with. So just take my word for it. But again, as a sign of the fact that Hungarian Jewry are a special case, Adolf Eichmann himself comes to Hungary, comes to Budapest, sets up shop in a very fancy hotel, brings with him, look at the word, a special task force, a Sonderkommando. Commando means task force, unit, something like that. And he personally oversaw, because this is what he'd been doing through the whole Holocaust, but he personally oversaw the logistics involved in getting the 800,000, give or take, Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz-Birkenau. So this was, again, a very special case. And so in April, right around Passover, actually, they forced the Jews into these ghettos. Now, these are not ghettos like the kind you're familiar with, perhaps from Poland. They're very hastily set up. There, some people are put in brickyards, and some people are put in old synagogues. Some people just crammed into other houses, and so on and so forth. They're very makeshift affairs, because the goal was not for them to wait there until the Germans could figure out what to do with them. They knew what they wanted to do with them. They wanted them all to go to Auschwitz to Birkenau. So basically, the ghettos were just going to be sort of hub and spoke, if you will, transit facilities to take people out in relays to the Auschwitz to Birkenau death camp. And so again, I have a map here for you, or three maps, a big one and two little ones. And here what we're looking at is essentially a situation where you have Carpathian Ruthenia, the upper right-hand map is the map of the Hungarian Gendarmerie. They're like the state police, the Hungarian state police districts, because the Hungarian state police were instrumental in basically seeing to it that the Jews had to left their homes and went to the ghettos, and also were instrumental in seeing to it that the Jews got on the trains and went to the death camp. So they, in a sense, implemented this process for the Germans. And so, in effect, they were collaborators. And so the Gendarmerie districts, as you see in the upper right-hand map, is basically how, according to those districts, how the Jews were taken out, in what order they were taken out to the death camps. And the first groups to go, again, were the groups in Carpathian Ruthenia and in northern Transylvania. You can see the dates are virtually the same. They overlap. And again, you see there's there was even a special route worked out where everybody winds up going to Auschwitz, on separate, the trains are separate, these parallel trains, but eventually at a place called Kassa, they come together and they go, it's a straight shot to Auschwitz. So this is the situation. And somewhere, and this is again, kind of depending what you're looking at and which population you're looking at, from the end of April until early July 44, they deport a good chunk of Hungarian Jewry. There were 800,000 Jews. Some of this not all of them went to Auschwitz, but they deport at least half, if not a little over half, of the Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. And again, the bulk of them go to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Some 45 transports, which is to say trains, each train carrying about 3,000 people. And by the way, what it worked out to on the ground was something along the lines of, on a good day, 8,000 to 12,000 people coming through the camp and being processed. Now, again, the Hungarian Jewry are a special case. Prior to the spring of 1944, again, as I said before, people who were taken to Auschwitz, the victims, were taken someplace. I hope you can see my cursor. I'm moving my cursor around, but if you look at the right-hand side of the map, you can see the rail spur. It says rail spur built in spring of 1944, because originally they would have had to be walking that half mile from this old freight depot to the camp. But instead, what the Germans did, anticipating this massive arrival of transports, they built a rail spur. You can see it down at the bottom of, on the southern side of the map, the southeastern side here, that would take them not only into the camp through the main gate, that's that green area there on the map, the green shaded area, but literally almost up to where the gas chambers are. Do you see that? You see them along the west end there of the camp. So basically, the idea of, deciding whom to gas and whom not to gas, whom to kill immediately and whom to kill later, in effect, basically was able to be done, again, fairly rapidly, right in the shadow of the crematoria, as soon as the trains pulled in, which again, very much speeded up this process. They were anticipating would be a much bulkier process, more massive in terms of humanity, the people coming in, than they had ever had to deal with before. And so here you have a picture of what you were looking at on the map, in effect. The upper picture has to do with, going through the main gate, there's the train track, and then coming, and you're on, that's the railroad spur into the camp. And then you come into the camp and there you are. And these birch trees, this tree line, in effect, that you're looking at here, is what gave the camp its name, Birkenau. The camp was actually built on a series of Polish villages, one of which was called Brzezinka, the main one. And I think another reason they called it Birkenau is because the Germans had a really hard time pronouncing Polish names, and so they tended to change all the names. But in any case, the train came right in, and heading towards this line of birch trees, in effect. And what you also see are these graveled areas alongside the tracks. They called that the ramp. In fact, they called it the Judenrampe, the Jew ramp. And so basically then they could unload, and they had several tracks, so they could unload a whole bunch of cars simultaneously. And that's one of the confusions when you're going to look at the pictures as to which train they're unloading and where people are standing. And I think the people who've been trying very hard to research and parse the album usually have the same problems, have similar problems trying to figure out what days and what trains, because there's so much action. So this is the situation. Now, the other thing that they do, and in all the camps, be it the old camps and the old camps that had closed prior to Auschwitz being the camp left, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, even whatever, Majdanek. The thing that's interesting here is that at Auschwitz-Birkenau, for this particular situation, it used to be that when people came into Auschwitz-Birkenau, before they even built the railroad spur, before they anticipated, arrival of Hungarian Jewry, what had happened was that they would simply pull people off the train, very quickly separate men from women, very quickly send most people to their deaths, leaving very few people, minimal numbers of people, to go into the camp. Now, by the time we're looking at here in spring of 1944, Auschwitz was not just a death camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. It was not just a kind of concentration camp, Auschwitz I, the main camp, but it was also a massive slave labor facility. The Auschwitz III Buna Monowitz, so Auschwitz I, II, and III. And basically, they also therefore needed slave laborers for the slave labor facilities that had been built in Auschwitz III Buna Monowitz, really in 43. So what you have going on too is that to some degree, people coming off the trains, especially now in this situation, were also going to be pulled off, some of them for work. But you have to be very careful with that, because again, when people give accounts of their experiences at Auschwitz-Birkenau, they say something like, well, I was, chosen because I was young and fit, and so they sent me to work. And my family, of course, they were sent to their deaths. But in point of fact, no. Everyone was supposed to die. Some would die sooner, which is to say gassed immediately, and others would die later, worked to death. They had a name for that too, Vernichtung durch Arbeit, annihilation through work. And so when we get to this last sort of days, if you will, of the Holocaust, the Germans are under great, they do need slave labor. They are increasingly in need of this. The war, don't forget, when all the things you're going to see here happened, it was just a month before the Normandy invasion. And then they happen over the course of the Normandy invasion. And so again, you're looking at a situation where the Germans have certain problems and they create special solutions to address those problems. So taking Jews into the slave labor system, which happened increasingly from 43 on, really was a function of this need, because they hadn't intended to do that. Originally, as I said, people came into the camp and were killed immediately. And that was pretty much the deal. And when you look at your Blinka, Chelmno, Belzec, Sobibor, they definitely were taken to the camps and killed immediately. But here we have this much more attenuated process. And so it's several steps: arrival, sorting, selection, murder, disposal. And you can see that they're attenuated steps. And they have to do with a kind of flow chart, if you will, of getting everybody to where they should be, either to some kind of protracted annihilation or to immediate annihilation and then disposal of their goods in a set of warehouses they called Canada, which is German for Canada, because Canada was supposedly, a symbol of great prosperity and all manner of good material things, and the crematorium. So you were going to wind up in one of two places: your stuff in the Canada and yourself either immediately or eventually in the crematorium. This was the destruction process. Now, just a map again. I showed you a map before, a very similar map, but now I've put more pictures on it. And so here you have a very sort of detailed schematic for all of the different things that I was talking about. You can see certain areas are dedicated areas for arrival, dedicated areas for sorting and selection. And I'll talk about what those specific things all are. And then, of course, also dedicated areas for immediate murder and protracted murder. And also for the different kinds of disposal, the crematoria, and of course the warehouses. Next slide. Okay, so we've got that much. Now, the next thing I want to set up for you is our backstory. So we have the setting, and as you know, with every composed kind of visual set of effects or artifacts, there's always a backstory to them. And so now we're looking at another special thing, a special album. And this is what part of the title of this presentation is. And so we have to go, now again, a backstory starts at various points in time. And you can see I've called this piece of the backstory serendipity, which means a find you didn't expect to find, surprising discovery, if you will, a special discovery. And it starts in April of 1945 at the labor camp of Mittelbau-Dora, which is a sub-camp, I believe, of Buchenwald. There was a woman there who'd been liberated by the Americans at Mittelbau-Dora. Her name was Lily Meyer. And she was searching in the SS barracks for some clothing or something, you know, after the Americans had liberated her. And instead, what she found was a photograph album. And the title of the album was Resettlement of the Jews from Hungary. And she noticed, leafing through it, that there were pictures in it of herself. Here she is, the bottom left-hand side. Her two brothers, her younger brothers, she had 5 brothers, her paternal grandparents, and her aunt, and her aunt's 4 children. Also, there were other pictures of other people as well. She and her family had come to Auschwitz-Birkenau on May 26, 1944, a Friday, from the Bergzas ghetto in, again, Carpathian Ruthenia. Now it's in the Ukraine. And realizing this was her family, she kept the album. Now, fast forward a little bit. The Frankfurt Auschwitz trial, in Frankfurt in 1963, during the Auschwitz trials there, where a number of guards and so on, personnel from Auschwitz were tried in the German criminal court, the album was used as evidence. And then Serge Klarsfeld, the Nazi hunter, the man who brought so many after the war, the regular, you know, the Nuremberg trials later on, brought a number of cases against Nazi war criminals. He convinced her to give the album to Yad Vashem. And so there's a nice picture of her giving the album to Yehuda Bauer, who was then, I think, the chief historian at Yad Vashem. And he also edited the first edition, the published edition of the album. So there's a nice cover of the album. This is, if you were to buy the Auschwitz album, and you can buy it, it's online, the older versions of it look exactly like this. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, so what about the album? As I said, it's a special album. As an artifact, an object, it is a linen-covered album, and you can see it there. That's pretty much what it looks like. It has 100, I think it's 193 photographs on about 56, 57 pages, and it varies from 1 to 4 photographs for the page. Now, how many copies of this album there are is very interesting. There's definitely 1, and there were possibly 2 others made. And when we talk about why it was made, we'll get a better sense of that. The time frame is this period when the Jews from Carpathian Ruthenia and some from northern Transylvania were being deported to Auschwitz to Birkenau. And you can see here, I have the inside front cover. I have the front cover of the album, and I've got the inside front cover in the first page. Now, today of all days, I came across the inside front cover. Actually, you can see faintly some writing. Well, clearly it's an inscription of some kind, but I couldn't make it out. It was on the German Historical Museum's website in Germany. And I couldn't bring it up to make it clearer, so I don't know what it actually says, but it said something, you know, there's clearly was a dedication to someone, like like you sign a book for someone. And again, the title is Resettlement of the Jews from Hungary. And resettlement is one, again, of those words that were used, Umsiedlung, you see it down at the bottom, that were used by the Germans, again, as these sort of neutral, bureaucratic, technical terms. Now also, what about the project? Because it was a project. The person who initiates them, and this has a very interesting history too. The person who initiates the project is Rudolf Höss. Rudolf Höss was the first commandant of Auschwitz when it was still a concentration camp, and he oversaw because Himmler, had told him this was going to happen and gave this very much a point of pride to him, that he wants, Himmler wanted his camp to be the camp, and he told him that in 1941. So he was the first commandant of Auschwitz, and he had eventually been promoted in 1940. In 1943, he was promoted, left Auschwitz, and went to a larger bureaucratic aspect of the SS, where he was in charge of overseeing lots of different concentration and slave labor camps. But he was called back again to Auschwitz-Birkenau in May of 44 to supervise the genocide of the Hungarian Jews, Aktion Höss. And again, Himmler had done this for him. Again, another feather in his cap. And so he decided to make a presentation volume of what was going on at the camp, of these transports, of a transport, or at least a mythical transport, a mythical that it didn't happen, but a kind of typical transport. And so he was going to make this as a presentation volume for Heinrich Himmler. And he was going to give a copy. There was supposedly a copy going to be given to Richard Bayer, who was the actual commandant at the time of Auschwitz, the official commandant. Now, again, the photographers are interesting here too. There were two photographers, both SS men. One of them was a guy named Bernhard Walter, who ran the identification service at Auschwitz, the Erkennungsdienst. And if you've seen pictures, and you will when you go to the exhibit, I'm sure, see those, they look like mugshots of various prisoners, not a lot of them not Jewish, Polish prisoners and Polish non-Jews and so on. They look like mugshots in striped clothing, several views of the same person. That was the Erkennungsdienst job. It was the identification service. It actually kept all photographic records of Auschwitz, and all the photographs you're likely to see of Auschwitz that come out of Auschwitz were often mostly done by Bernhard Walter, who was the head of the identification service. He was also assisted by another SS person named Ernst Hoffmann. And then in addition to that, because the Erkennungsdienst is an entire installation, it had its own block basically in Auschwitz I, Block 26. There were several Polish inmates, many of whom had been professionals of various kinds, either photographers, developers, processors, before the war, who, again, these are non-Jews, who were then working in the Erkennungsdienst. And the prisoners, these, and I give some names here, Wilhelm Brasse and Franciszek Miszkowski, basically did a lot of the processing work for this album. It's not clear who put the photos in the album, who decided how they would go, who arranged them. And it's not clear who chose the photos because so many were taken. But definitely Miszkowski did, you'll see his lovely handwriting when we get to the pictures. And Brasse did a lot. Brasse claims he did a lot of the photographs himself. After the war, they both men gave testimonies of various kinds. And Brasse, well, he's not around anymore, but he was. And he often, was quite voluble about, what had been done and what hadn't been done. He claims that he was able to give 44,000 photographs to the Auschwitz, what has now become the Auschwitz Museum, on the Auschwitz site. Now, here's the cute part, because where do we get to Dora Mittelbau? How did the album get to Dora Mittelbau? Well, here's an interesting explanation, because in January of 1945, when the Soviets were coming, heading towards Auschwitz, and the Germans were pulling everybody out, Walter, the head photographer, the head of the Erkennungsdienst, and a number of other SS staff were sent to Mittelbau Dora, and he took the album with him. And that's how clearly Lily Meyer found it. Now, it's a photograph album, which means people took photographs. And so there's a staging. They're there to try to get shots of things. And so what I want to show you now is how a shot might have been arranged. Now here we have this picture on the lower left-hand side. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Some of you might be. It's one of the more iconic photographs. In fact, it's often used whenever there's something to do with Auschwitz. They show this picture. It's a group of women and children on arrival, and that's kind of an odd designation because in fact, they've gone through the sorting process already. You can see the women and children. Now, and you see in the slide above, the picture above them also, a row of women and children. So where are the men? Well, the men are on the other side. In other words, here are the women and children, and then imagine, look at the upper picture. Imagine going down a few steps, going down a few diagonal steps, and the men would be lined up parallel to them. So here's this picture, and I'll show you how they set up the shot of the lower left-hand picture. So here are the women and children. There's a larger version of that shot, very important shot. And look at that. There were more women and children on either side, and the men were apart from them. They had already been sorted. And here are the photographers. Well, here's the photographer, excuse me. And then here are the guards. Now, you see I wrote dog in question mark, dog in question mark. Survivors who talk about arriving in Auschwitz tell you there were dogs. They also tell you there were guns. Well, we'll see the guns in a minute. But what's interesting here is that throughout any of the photographs you're going to see, there are no dogs. But yet, the source I used for this, which has to do with a group of young German researchers under the direction of Dr. Stefan Herdler from the University of Göttingen, definitely thought there were dogs. So they put in actual dogs, but I just put in hypothetical dogs because I'm not convinced. I have a feeling this thing was much more staged in some ways than, even we would think, in that things were kept deliberately much calmer than usual, as you're going to see. Now here's another shot that's interesting. Here we have the arrival of a train. All right, so there's a second way of getting the shot. Put a pin in that one. We'll come back to it. You see the train arriving on the upper right-hand side? Okay, now here we have a group of women and children standing by the train. Okay, upper right-hand side. Now, again, lower left-hand side, the shot we just saw. And now a shot of this word Aussortierung means selection, sorting out. They also use the word selection, but for the purposes of this album, they used a much even blander term, sorting out, whatever that means. So two shots of the same group of people in different parts, minutely apart parts of the selection process. Now look at what they did. Here's how they got these shots. All of these people came in on this transport at this time. And what they were doing, and we had two photographers working. We had one photographer perched on the top of the train. You see how in number one, you can see there the photographers, the P means photographer, and you can see that group of people at the upper, in the top there, like a whole bunch of people seemingly just in a bunch, in a crowd. That same picture is this one, but reversed. Number 4 is the same scene, but reversed. Because now the main gate is now behind them and they are facing the gas chambers. Whereas number 1, the main gate is behind them and they're facing the gas chambers. In number 4, they're facing the gas chambers, sorry. And in number 1, the main gate is behind them and they're facing the gas chambers that way. So we have different, basically, perspectives on this. And what you're looking at here is the two sections where these photographs come from in the same larger photograph. So we have the one we just saw, number 2, of the women and children. That separation is taking place where those two circles are at the top. You're just seeing different perspectives of it. This part here is even more interesting. Photograph number 3 are a group of women and children who have already been finished the selection process, are about to go to the gas chambers. And what does the photographer do? He stops them and tells them, hold on, the second photographer, I need to take a shot. And it's all part of the same action scene. And so now we have to come to the story, because that's what you came here for. So there are really two stories. There's the envisioned story, And then there's the other story. Let's start with the envisioned story. So what are we intended to see? Now, again, this is not intended for you and me. This is intended for Heinrich Himmler. So what was Himmler supposed to be seeing? What did Rudolf Höss want Himmler to see in this album? Well, they wanted Himmler to see guys working really hard, a hard day's work, doing a really good job, and more importantly, as you're going to see, an organic process. Now, what do I mean by that? Something that flows along because it's natural. Because it's natural. And the way the album is put together, and I'm just going to treat you to a few pieces of it here before I go to the other story. The way the album is put together, even though the pictures don't necessarily all come from the same transports, the topics make it clear there's a flow. We start with arrival, we go to something else, we go to the next thing. There's a flow, a natural flow. It's organic. And the other thing they want Himmler to see is look at how few of us there are, but look at how well, how calmly, how efficiently we do this. And look at how helpful the inmates are, certain inmates. I call them here punctilious, which isn't a put down, because they're assisted by large but select numbers of inmates who have jobs to do. So everyone is working in this well-oiled organic process or a machine, however you want to term it. What are we not going to see? What are we not intended to see? They don't want Himmler to see this, because it would also take away from the smoothness, right? This is done like a by the book thing. So you never see guns trained on anyone. And all survivors will tell you they came off the trains and people had guns and they were aiming them and they were shooting too. And you don't see dogs. I'm really fixated on this, but there you are. You don't see dogs. You also don't see overt violence, which does not mean violence didn't take place. You can easily leave that on the cutting room floor. But the other thing that you don't see are frantic victims. What you see are preoccupied victims. You'd be preoccupied too if you had 3 children and you hadn't eaten for 3 days, and you were also carrying all these bundles, and you also had your old mother with you and whatever else. So people are phenomenally preoccupied and obviously bewildered, or at least bemused. And I don't mean that in the sense of amused, but kind of like mystified. And you don't see the smoking crematorium chimneys, which largely had to be stoked up a few hours in advance of a transport to be hot enough for the bodies to burn. And you don't see death. It's a kind of, if you forgive my levity here, G-rated genocide. Or maybe a PG genocide, but that's about as far as it goes. That's it. So that's the effect. It's a studied neutrality and almost a blandness. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some sample pages. So we just had the cover before. You saw that before. And again, here you have the first page of the album, the first inside and the inside cover. And what's interesting is the very first picture was taken in the Erkennungsdienst studio because it's very nicely lit. And the other picture is cut very artfully from a group of people, men standing out, outside, to kind of, model this. And again, the title, Resettlement of the Jews from Hungary. This is office talk. This is bureaucraties. This is neutral talk. And what it means is deportation to a death camp. Amtssprach for that. So Umsiedlung means deportation to a death camp. Now, this is chapter 1. A train arrives. Arrival of a transport train. And what I've done, you see that pretty handwriting there, that's what Mishkovsky did. What I did is I found a font that was similar to his to give you the English translations. I didn't want to break the rhythm more than I had to. So this is the first thing after you see those men that says resettlement of the Jews from Hungary. And then you have, I'm just giving you the chapter headings. Aussortierung, again, sorting out, which is a very bland neutral term for the term the Germans really used, which was also a somewhat bland term, Selektion. And then the next chapter, which I think is interesting, they have the sorting before they have the men on arrival, which again, whoever arranged it, that's how they arranged it. So men on arrival, women on arrival. And the reason I starred this picture here is because it belongs here. These are women on arrival, or they might be women who've actually been sorted and selected. Again, it's unclear in some cases, because again, the group above, I already told you, had been selected already when this picture was taken, yet it's stuck in with women on arrival, which gives me the idea that whoever was actually arranging the album could very well have been a prisoner that wasn't really familiar with what had actually happened when these photographs were taken, but was going on instinct. Why did I star this? You'll see a few slides from now, a few pictures from now, but what you have here basically is a group of, is a group, again, this notion of people just coming into the camp. Then we have, and again, some interesting Nazi speak here, interesting SS bureaucraties after the sorting out. And then you have telling, that's our chapter, next chapter. So arrival, sorting, after the sorting out. And then we have men still fit for use. Now, the best way to translate that, the blandest way, the most bureaucratic way, einsatzfähig. Fähig means, fähig means capable, and Einsatz means action. So capable of action, capable of use, fit for use. I like the word operational myself, but I didn't feel like putting it in the translation because so many people, when they do this page, don't use that term. But I think operational is the right word. It fits with the sort of military kind of bureaucratic language we're looking at here. And now you see why I starred that picture. These are women still fit for use. And this picture got put there by mistake because it repeats itself. I wonder what Himmler thought about it, assuming he ever saw it, which I doubt that he did. Here's another, now here are, again, now these are now no longer fit for use, men fit for use. And notice what the photographer had done here. One of the photographers gotten hold of a wicker chair to put this disabled person in as a kind of prop. And this is a no longer, women and children no longer fit for use. These are women. Here are women and children. This photograph on the lower left-hand side, I'm sure, is very famous. And then, of course, again, they don't tell you, this is not captioned, but the next thing is people sitting outside of crematorium 4 or 5, waiting to go into the gas chambers. So death isn't even alluded to, except that they're no longer useful. Now here are the useful people after the delousing, which is to say when they've been processed into the camp. So here we have men, here we have women. And here we have another odd kind of glitch in the sense that this should have come before the after the delousing picture. This is again, it's I use the word briefing because that's the best translation. That's the most exact translation. And notice the use of a briefing, the way you like you're coming into a new situation and you're getting briefed, like you're getting oriented. So this is really what, again, very neutral, bland language. And then we have, of course, the final few pictures, the final section. There are many more pictures, obviously. I'm just giving you the sections. Effects, their property. And this is getting the stuff together off the train. More collection of items off the train. More collection of items. And then the Canada warehouse where they start processing the items. Well, that's their story. What's the other story? And here, we're going to look at some sequences. And we start with my first step, which is arrival. And it's the opening sequence. And the transport that I'm using is one that I was able to put together that other people have also, not just me, put together. And it's one where a series of slides, a series of photographs that you take from the album, you can pull them together and get a kind of sequential story. And so the opening sequence is with respect to the transport from Techo, Hungary. And we're going to call it the Techo transport. And the subtitle is Karlsruhe 23/6. 23, what is it, 60 there. And that's because it has 23, the Karlsruhe is the name on the car, the railroad car. It's a car that had originated in the city of Karlsruhe in Germany, but they had chalked on it the number 23 because it's freight car number 23 in the transport. And then the other number is how many victims there are, how many people had come on that. And so that's how we're going to identify this one. So it's May 28th, 1947, 1944, a little bit before 11 o'clock in the, I'm sorry, a little bit after 11 o'clock in the morning. How do they know 11 o'clock? They went by the shadows. They went by the shadows. And so a train pulls in. And I have a map here. I'll show you a better picture of the train in a minute. But I have a map here to show you where we are. And I'm going to put these little maps on some of the slides to keep you oriented. So the train has pulled in. You see that yellow arrow? And you see the number 1? That's where the train's going to come in. So it's come in. And the people, so there are 2 trains, one empty and one full. The full one has the red arrow over it. The people in the empty train have probably been already sent to crematorium 2 and 3. And they pulled in earlier in the morning. The people on this train will probably go to 4 and 5, but they cannot be let out of the trains until the Canada Commando, which is the unit that works the warehouses, the unit of men that works the warehouses, that collects the belongings off the platform and so on, and takes them to the warehouses, has cleaned the train. The tracks, the ramp have to be whistle stop clean as a whistle, because no one is supposed to know what is going to happen. So here we have a larger shot, and you can see exactly what we're looking at. So the main gate's off our screen. The Canada Commando is working. There's an empty train. There's a newly arrived train. You can see crematorium 2. You can see crematorium 3. And you have my map to orient you. And you can see an SS man poised at the train door. Hard to know what he's doing there because they aren't about to open the train. One set of researchers has said that Bernhard Walter, who is probably perched on the roof of the car, because that's where he's taking the shots from, he often had them rehearse pretending to open and close the doors. So he would get really good shots and people would come out in a sort of flourishy way. So this is the first part of our sequence. Next part of our sequence. And so again, now the train is gone, right? No train. The left-hand train is gone. So the people, because they cleaned the track, they've moved the train. Now they open the doors and people come out. And the people are walking in the direction of the gas chambers. They are walking down the ramp to the middle of the train, because what they're going to do is they're going to split the train in 2 and do selections from either end. So they begin, the people we're looking at begin moving down the ramp to the middle of the train, and you can see that the photographer is going to follow them as we go along. He's moved again. And now we see more closely the people carrying their bundles, and everybody's moving towards where people you can see in the middle of the train are laying down their bundles. And you notice a Canada truck there as well. And notice here too, very interesting, this wasn't normally allowed, but here's a Canada Commando talking to a woman that he clearly knows, having a chat. This is why I say these pictures are very interesting, because there's a lot less of the kind of terror and franticness that you're used to hearing from the descriptions of survivors. Now again, the sequence continues. And now the photographer or his assistant has moved off the roof of the car and inside one of the middle cars. And he's probably, well, he is above the people, because if you looked at the opening shots, the trains are usually fairly high up off the ground. You have to kind of jump down. So the photographer is in a very good position to shoot into the crowd. And you can see some people waving to people they seem to know, maybe come on over here. Notice the Canada Commando. We're going to follow these same guys. And notice too what natty little white scarves they're wearing. That was another thing that kind of always struck me, that some of the uniforms you're going to see look a lot better than the kind you usually hear descriptions of. And the SS man here that I put a little red square around, he will appear later too. So we know this is all one part of a sort of a sequence, a set of sequences. So the people are now in the middle of the train and they're putting down their bundles. And this is just another sequence shot, again, of the same Canada Commando, and more people kind of trying to figure out what to do with all this stuff because they've been told to leave it. And notice one of the Canada Commandos even looking at the photographer. Again, the photographer is in the middle car, standing in the train, shooting down. And then they're sorted. And the sorting is a kind of interesting process because again, they you know, in the actual album itself that I showed you, they use Assortierung, sorting out, to mean everything, sorting and selection. But in fact, what they're told is men and women, men and boys separate, women and children separate, form two sets of lines. And so here we have pictures of the Techo transport and another transport, the Berzas transport, which came in a couple of days ahead, which is the one where Lily Meyer's family was on. So I'm going to show you, like, you know, shift from one to the other. So sorting: ambulatory women and children, ambulatory men and boys, and non-ambulatory whatever, mostly elderly people, but some others as well. Okay, now another sequence. And here you have to see something interesting. And again, we're still with this Techo transport because it's the same people we've been seeing all along right now. Notice the gap between the two halves of the train. What they have done is they've split the train. The people we've been following have now been stopped. You see them stopped in a row across at the upper, backing up all the way to the main gate. And the people from the first half of the train have been, or in the process of the selection being completed. And they're going to be moving through that gap in the trains. They're going to be coming back this way, coming back up to the gap between the trains, and that's going to take them out to the Lagerstrasse that takes them to Crematoria 4 and 5. And so here we have, you saw this picture before, now you know what you're seeing. Here we have the selection of the group we've been following about to start, and the group from the first half of the train pretty much coming to the end. So here's that group of women and children I told you about that were told, stop, don't go anywhere, we're taking this picture. And yet the other photographer is on the roof of the car shooting down as always. And here is our SS man from the first shot I showed you. Now he's here. He's also made his way down the train. And here's where we get the name Karlsruhe. This is, again, the same group of women and children that I showed you before, the ones that were stopped on their way to the crematorium. You can see it says Karlsruhe, which is the origin point of that particular freight car. But what they chalked on the car was 2366. Car 23 carrying 66 persons. Actually, they didn't call them persons, they called them Stücke, pieces. And they're about to go through the gap in the train, which is in front of us, off screen, to go to the crematorium. Now having done that, the selection for this group will start. And what's interesting here too is take a look. You see that a number of people are looking through the gap in the train. They're looking back to the gap in the train, especially the people in the first couple of rows, as to where people have gone. Now here we have another sequence, again from this train. And what you have here they're essentially, as I said, follow the arrows. Now you see the gap up there in between the trains, that's where people would be going through if they're going to go to the crematoria. You see an elderly gentleman there already. Now, what you have here is you have women going, and here's another thing, survivors will tell you, and, you know, all due respect, they'll go, well, you know, they told me to go to the right because, you know, I was going to live, and my mother and father and my elderly, you know, my little children or whatever went left because they were going to die. And that's this common kind of, you know, perception we have. Right is good, left is bad. You know, it's that old sort of right-handed, left-handed thing. But that's not the case. It really, you know, it varied depending on what side of the train you came in, what side of the train you know, what side of the ramp you came in. It varied depending on which crematoria they were going to send you to. It was a much more complicated process. These women are good. The women here, the people in these photos are going right, and they're going to a waiting area. They are going to go for protracted murder. They're not going to be killed immediately, and they are going right. They're going to cross the tracks, and they're going to go to the special waiting area where they kept all the people they were saving to bring into the camp so they could bring them all in at once they'd finished the transport. And so here we have, again, some interesting, and there are all these little stories, like, or at least repetitious pictures that I find fascinating. Here you have, for example, in the first shot on the upper left-hand side, I have two numbers, number 1, number 2, and here you can see them online, further forward, closer to the selection point. And here are 2 more young women going into the camp, going to the waiting area. And then here we have, see the young lady in the white coat, in the lower left-hand side? Well, on the lower right-hand side here, she is waiting in line. And she's going into the camp too. She's going into the waiting area too. Again, still further, these are, again, women in the waiting area, like all those other young women that I showed you, other young, well, in this case, young women, in the waiting area, waiting to go into the camp. They have crossed the tracks. Meanwhile, behind them, the selection is still going on. Again, very similar. We have more sequential shots. Here we have a young woman on arrival. Here we have her going into the camp on the first row, the top row, number 1. The young woman, I put a number 1 number. She's probably the only person in that group who was sent into the camp. Now here we have 2 other women on arrival or at sorting, and here they are on their way to crematorium 4 or 5. Similarly with the men. Here we have the waiting selection, and here we have the ones who've been selected. And on the upper row pictures, you can see that when you get to the second shot, the upper right-hand shot, the old men are gone. Or the older men, I shouldn't say old men, the older men. And here too, we have an interesting picture. I wanted to share this with you because of the continuity, a waiting selection, and now the group of men who have been waiting, who are now waiting in that special waiting area to go into the camp. And notice I put a question mark over that little boy. How did he get by? Now here we have another little story. And I do want to give you enough time to ask questions, so I won't go much past some of this, but another little story. And you can, you know, it's very interesting here too, because so much is going on. First of all, look at all the people already on their way to Krema 2 or 3. And this is from Bergstadt. This is the Bergstadt transport that Lily Meyer was on, because here are the same non-ambulatory people that were in the picture with her, where she identified her paternal grandparents. So I put little coordinated dots on them so you can see them. And here you have another interesting thing, because here people who go into the camp are going left, and people who go to the crematoria are going right. And so as a consequence, you can see some people here looking in the lower left-hand side, looking, some women who are about to go to the crematoria, to the line, to join the line going to the crematoria. They are basically looking to see who's been sent elsewhere. And you have a very active very active selection going on. All kinds of stuff is happening. But notice number 1 and number 2. Here's it's hard. It's a man here who has a well, you'll see it better in the next slide, but he's got a fur collared coat on, and he seems to be looking in the direction, and you'll see it better in the next slide too, of a woman here whom a Canada commando is approaching. And he seems, this is what he's doing. He's looking at her. Why is he doing that? Could it be his wife? Do you see it? Now here's a closer shot of this. And I didn't blow this up. This is one of the shots from the album. And notice here, the Canada commando is helping his wife. Now, one possibility is his wife is about to be selected. Because you'll see what happens to her in a moment. And here he is looking at his wife. You see, it's a direct line of sight. Number 1 looking at number 2. And again, we know this is all the same frame because here are the same non-ambulatory. And notice the same repetition of the baby carriages and items that have been left at the last minute over there in the upper left-hand corner. Now we'll go to the next part of the sequence, and it concludes because here you have the man again looking in the direction of women going to join that line to the crematorium. And what do you have? You can't see her, so maybe she's in front of them. All the meanwhile, people are going left into the camp and people are going across the tracks to join that line. Another sequence, and this is one of my, and I'm not sure what transport this is, so I've given it, I think I gave it a kind of, hypothetical name here, but basically this is quite the story here too. Here's a man, first of all, here are 2 selection lines, and here is a man who has lost all of his, his outer clothing, his trousers, one of his shoes. And there seems to be something going on there with respect to the SS and with respect to the Sonderkommando. And notice the other men are kind of laughing. They look kind of amused about the whole thing. And they're certainly paying attention. Meanwhile, a woman is being sent with her baby to the crematorium. And another group is ready to be basically selected. And also an SS guy is coming on duty. Clearly he wasn't there before. And so now what has happened? First of all, the man that seemed to have all those, had lost all his clothing and seemed to have had some kind of breakdown is being either taken away or put back in further in the line by the Canada Commando. And the group that was behind the mother with the baby is now on their way to the crematorium. And the SS guy who came on duty, he is helping direct them out. And so here we have the Barracks S transport. Now we go to immediate murder. The Barracks S transport is on its way to one of the 2 crematoriums, 2 or 3. That's the Meyer's family. This is a different transport, not one of the Barracks S, one of the 2 that we've been following. And they're standing, again, very interestingly, they're standing between the 2 crematoria. They are standing in front of crematorium 3, and they're facing crematorium 2. And the photographer is standing in front of crematorium 2 taking the photograph. And again, this group, like many, has been told, stop, I'm taking your photograph. And more of these, again, in terms of going to immediate murder. The reason I put this upper piece together is because you can see it's sequential. That little girl that I put a green dot on is what unifies it. It's a line of people going. And they're being caught as they move. On the other hand, in the lower picture, you have the same, roughly the same group, but told to stand and then told to go. And the reason I put all those dots there is because I wanted you to get a sense of the connectedness of these groups, of mother and children, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we are looking at a transport, not one of the two we've been following. Again, so I've labeled it other transports that are waiting outside of crematorium 4 to go to the gas chamber. And this is an interesting shot too, because again, it gives you a sense of continuity. First, you have the still shot where you have this little family group in the lower right-hand side. They're standing still for the photographer, and you can see the young boy. I have the green dot on him, his younger sister, his mother, his grandmother, whatever. And then in the next, and he seems transfixed by the photographer, because in the next, in the upper right-hand side, the upper left-hand side, the big picture, you see his family moving on, and he's still gobsmacked by the photographer. And then, of course, we have protracted murder, the people who've been chosen, you know, who've been selected to go into the camp, to be processed into the camp. And so we have pictures of the same group, the upper row. And you can see something else that I noticed when I first started looking at these pictures in some detail. Some of the men are cradling their arms or holding their arms up as if they're favoring them where they'd been tattooed. And you can see here the lower photos, the lower two photos, I showed the group, this group of men, it's the same, well, it's some of the same men, on arrival. And then here, two of whom have been processed into the camp in this group. And you can see one had glasses and he kind of lost the glasses. Now, how long he lasted after that's hard to know. Similarly, the women, and notice too how neat their clothes look. Even the men's clothes look quite clean, the men's uniforms. They weren't necessarily given clean clothing. The uniforms they were given may have been deloused or whatever they did with them, but they certainly did not necessarily give them brand new, fresh, you know, smack out of the laundry clothing. And so again, my sense is here, some of this was done for the sake of making this look, you know, like a perfect action. And notice too, the woman in the lower right-hand photo, she appears to be pregnant. And she got by because pregnant women were immediately sent to their deaths. And finally, we come to disposal of property. And here you have this picture of the women watching the Canada trucks go by. Many people who caption this photo talk about how, oh, they're watching their stuff go by as they're going to the gas chamber. But I'm not convinced of that. My sense is this is one of the groups of women that were in a waiting facility, because you don't see a lot of children among them. There would be many more children. There would be children, there aren't any. And then processing in Canada. And take a look too at the very natty clothing that the women are wearing, very smart, dark, you know, white shirts and dark trousers. And this is the only, to me, this is the most one, this is the last shot I think I want to show you of these sequences here. This is, again, from the Techo transport. The Karlsruhe 2366 transport. And this is the one I found most fascinating because the Canada warehouse backs onto crematoria 4 and 5. And you can tell the trees, here are the trees from that little grove everybody was in. And so, but what do you see here? You see the first smoke. And the smoke is not from the crematorium, it's from the pits that they had to dig to burn the bodies in because the crematoria were not capable of handling the loads presented by the murders of Hungarian Jewry. And so here we have our only real instance of an inkling of what really had been going on or was about to go on. And so now I only have a few more things to show you. And I called it the coda. A British broadcasting company, not the BBC, I think it was Channel 4 in England, last January, a year ago, put out a color, did a two-part documentary where they colorized the photographs, amongst other photographs, but many, and I think the color is really something. Because when we see black and white, it kind of antiquates it. You may remember if you've seen Schindler's List, he starts out in color and switches to black and white. And in his mind, Steven Spielberg's mind, this was shocking in a sense and more real in a sense, brings, you know, sort of humanizes the people more, because in color, we see them as we expect to see photographs. This isn't color like you see in real life necessarily, but it is definitely color that we are accustomed to seeing in photographs. And that makes it real. Let me show you a couple of others. I chose some of the ones that we already seen. This is that wonderful arrival shot where they still have the empty train and the full train. And that's the picture of Lily Meyer's two brothers. And this is done by a different person, not the British, not Channel 4, but somebody else who does fairly decent colorization. This is the shot that I kept showing you, our iconic shot. And that's a group, I showed you this picture too. It came with some of the men, you know, on arrival. And that's the selection photo. Another group of men. The color is amazing. I mean, it brings it all so humanly to you. And some of the women, this one is really well done. And we've seen this one. And that's it. Now, I welcome questions. I hope that there are some that I can answer. So Jessica, Shelley, let me know what I have to do now.
Fran, if you could stop sharing your screen.
Thanks. Okay, let me just end the show. Oh, I could just stop sharing the screen. There we are.
So first of all, thank you so much. That's so much information, and ending on those pair of photographs is truly remarkable. We do have a few questions from people that have been in the chat. One is, how many people, or maybe what percentage of the people in the album have been identified?
That's a good question. I can't give you a percentage. There have been any number of publications that have indicate, you know, that basically lots of the people have been identified. Let me put it that way. I can't give you a percentage like 100%, or there are what we're looking at is a transport of 3,000 people at least per person, basically, you know, per you know, what's the word, per processing. And so of those, I've come across lots of identifications, but I would say probably not more than, out of 3,000 people, they maybe are able to have identified a few hundred. So we're still looking at a very modest amount, And the other problem with identifying people is that many identifications have been disputed, and people go, no, this could be so-and-so, or it could be so-and-so. Or it could be so-and-so. So it's hard to say. Let me show you a book I have here, just a minute. It's called the Auschwitz Album, The Story of a Transport. See that? And if you go through this book, and this is available, you can buy it. It's also available in libraries and whatever. You'll see any number of identifications. But then again, they're also disputed. So it's hard to say, but I would say at least out of every, you know, every photograph I've seen in this album, I'd say on every page, at most 10 people have been identified. So that's basically what we're looking at.
Given the fact that you've explained that this was a controlled situation, so they were maintaining calm very carefully, we do know that, you know, the question is, how did the Nazis control the Jews gaining information about the camps? How did they keep calm in these situations so they could run this process?
You mean generally speaking, or specifically to, oh, generally speaking? Well, there's an entire history, if you will, not just having to do with Auschwitz, having to do with Treblinka, having to do with the other camps in Poland, where people have been told this is what's going to happen and they don't believe it. So on the one hand, you have to deal with the idea of, a quote, normal disbelief. You're told this absurd thing, even if it's a reliable source like, the Jewish underground or something. You're told something, you're not going to believe it. Now, that said, a lot of information, chapter and verse, was not available to the Jews. The Allies knew things, lots of people knew things, the Jews sort of knew things. Hungarian Jews and Jews who were on these transports for this Auschwitz album, people who survived, will tell you that people had escaped to Hungary from Poland and said they're doing these horrific things in Poland. And everybody's like, well, that's Poland. It's not Hungary. It's not going to happen. And then when the Germans come into Hungary, great pains have been taken in many ways to keep specific information from the Jewish community. In fact, two prisoners had escaped from Auschwitz and gone specifically to the Jewish community, to the heads of the Jewish community, and told them, please, this is what's going on. They took pictures. They had, not pictures, but they had sketches of the spur line and everything. And the heads of the Jewish communities didn't know what to do about that information, and also half disbelieved it. You can't be serious. And so this tradition of disbelief, which makes perfect sense, because what sensible person could believe such a thing? You can believe they're hacking people. You can believe they're shooting people. But the idea of these elaborate gassing installations and this systematic, very rapid genocidal process is impossible to get your mind around. Do you know that Stephen Hordler from Göttingen, when they were looking they're very technologically oriented, these young men. And what they did was they mapped out how much time it took based on the shadows of the sun to get everybody selected of 3,000 people. And they said it was 90 minutes. 90 minutes. Now, who would believe such a thing when confronted with it?
Among the people, the other prisoners who met the Jewish transports, the Sonderkommando, the people in Canada, can you speak to who those people were? Were they Jewish prisoners themselves? Who made up the Sonder and the Canada commandos?
Well, the Sonderkommando was Jews. There were some non-Jews, but it was mostly Jews. The Canada Commando was mixed. There were some non-Jews there as well. But the Canada Commando that went to the trains were generally Jewish. And that was part of the German crowd control policy, no matter. Because often they could speak to the inmates, the arrivals, excuse me, and they could help get them moving. Now, this thing you have to understand is the way the Germans ran this situation, and they did this throughout the war when it came to the genocidal process, whether it was the Einsatzgruppen, whether it was in the ghettos, whatever. They relied a lot on either Jews or local non-Jews to help, because they had a chronic manpower problem, and they needed every single last man for the German man for the front. And so as a consequence, the way they were able to make, in effect, two wars work, the war against the Jews and the war for conquest, is to use what they had at hand. And in this case, it meant the individuals themselves. So the Sonderkommando were, of course, the people who pulled people out of the gas chambers and then burned the bodies. They were clearly going to be inmate labor. That fits into the framework of using inmate labor to do specific labor. But the Canada Commando, this sort of additional, what shall I say, sort of organizational duty that they had to have, was to keep everybody calm on the ramp. So when you see the scene, for example, of them taking that man away, perhaps putting him back in line, the man who seemed to have gone, had a breakdown, that's not unusual as to what they would do. Because this was part and parcel of how the Germans operated the system. They needed the inmates to work the system.
Can you speak to what the conditions on the train were like? What had these people been through?
Oh, okay. I'm glad somebody asked. I'm sorry?
What had they been through by the time those doors opened?
Well, here's the thing. In trying to date when these transports arrive, and it's very hard to get firm dates. Usually you go by the departure date. And for example, Lily Meyer's transport, which probably did arrive on May 26th, had left on May 24th. And so from May 24th to May 26th, they're on the road. They are in freight cars, box cars. They are standing or sitting. There are no seats. There are no bathrooms. There is no way to control temperature. There's no, if it's summer, you're, broiling, and if it's winter, you're freezing. In fact, the weather that when they came in to these two transports we were looking at, the Techo transport and the Bergstrasse transport, they came in, the days were nice and sunny, as you can see, especially the color shots show you how sunny and nice the day was. But it was a nice sunny day, but apparently it was a little chilly. And coming in the morning, either early in the morning or somewhat later in like mid-morning, you could see people are wearing first of all, they took everything they had with them, but they all are bundled up with their little headscarves on and whatnot. And it's not just for religious reasons. Even the kids are wearing little headscarves or little caps because of the fact that it was chilly. So, but the weather was relatively mild, but they were hungry. They had no sanitary facilities. They had been cooped up airless for days, 2 days, a trip that would normally take maybe a few hours. Because if you go back and look at the map, you'll see how close Auschwitz is actually. It's not that far away. It should be less than a day, certainly on the railroad trains. But it took them 2 days. And by the time they got there, if you look at the color shots, you can see how dirty and how, stressed out they were from the physical discomfort of the journey.
I think we'll take one more question. There's just more than we're going to be able to get
I'm
to.
so sorry I went on too long.
It's wonderful to have questions. Were most of the records and photographs from Auschwitz destroyed?
No, actually not. They weren't. A lot of them were kept. As I said, 5 digits worth of thousands apparently were around to turn over. They never were able to get rid of all of them. No, that's why, there are so many other photographs. In fact, some of the photographs you see of Auschwitz were not part of albums or anything. They were just there and they were saved.
Fran, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's just invaluable for us to be able to look at these photographs so closely. And I think it's a skill, we teach to really look at a document and really look at a photograph, but to personalize it the way you have is very impactful. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure.
On behalf of Union Station and MCHE, we hope you've learned something tonight. We hope you've learned several things tonight and that you'll join us for the rest of this series. And we wish you a very good evening.